Thank you, Hope, for inviting me. I'm a little nervous. I haven't never talked on this topic. I do a lot of talks, but not particularly on this. Rob, are you all set? I can't see the slide. Oh, there they are. Okay, all right, good. I'm going to be just shouting next as we go through. So you can go right through that first one. Okay, good. Well, where are we? Oh, yeah. Okay, there we are. All right. Well, obviously, I took the title of this talk, which is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Books, from Thomas Jefferson's draft of the, made it into the final Declaration of Independence too, but that line, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When I was thinking about that, I thought, pursuit of happiness seems kind of lightweight compared to life and liberty in the Declaration of Independence. But then I thought, no, it really isn't. It really holds the weight with the other items, because what he is talking about there is intellectual freedom, the happiness to pursue things in your life that you enjoy, that you want to do, and all of that. Now, even if you were not at liberty, if you were in prison, if you were shackled by bodily afflictions, or actually enslaved, if you had the freedom to think and feel and explore, that would still be a life worth living. But if you couldn't think, if you didn't have the freedom of thought, then maybe you would consider that life might not be worth living. So when I think about it, I think, yeah, the pursuit of happiness is important, just as important as that liberty and life that's in the Declaration of Independence. Now, I was a librarian for almost 30 years. I was also a high school teacher and taught at community college level. Being a librarian, you can go on to the next slide. I've got to remember to tell them when to go to the next slide. As a member of an ALA, American Library Association, and they define intellectual freedom as the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. It provides for free access to all expressions of ideas through which any and all sides of a question, cause, or movement may be explored. So as a librarian and as an educator, and as I hope a right thinker, that is very important to me and was very important to me as a librarian. Okay, next slide. Now, we have heard stories about how books have changed and saved lives. I want to, and that's part of the reasons why I became a librarian. The books were so important. But I wanted to share a couple of stories here. The first one, the woman there on the screen, is Helen Fagan. And at near the age of 100, she was asked to write a letter about her experiences in Poland during the Holocaust. And she wrote this. I'm going to read just a couple of excerpts from her letter. At 21, I was forced into Poland's World War II ghetto, where being caught reading anything forbidden by the Nazis meant at best hard labor, at worst death. There, I conducted a clandestine school offering Jewish children a chance at the essential education denied them by their captors. But I soon came to feel that teaching these sensitive young souls Latin and mathematics was cheating them of something far more essential. What they needed wasn't dry information, but hope, the kind that comes from being transported into a dream world of possibility. One day, as if guessing my thoughts, one girl beseeched me, "Could you please just tell us a story, a book?" I had spent the previous night reading Gone with the Wind, one of the few smuggled books circulated among trustworthy people via an underground channel on their word of honor to read only at night, in secret. No one was allowed to keep the book longer than one night. That way, if reported, the book would have already changed hands by the time the searchers came. I had read Gone with the Wind from dusk until dawn, and it still illuminated my own dream world. So I invited these young dreamers to join me, and I told them the book. They shared the loves and trials of Rhett Butler, Scarlett O'Hara, Ashley, and Melanie Wilkes. And then a knock on the door shattered her dream world. I'm going to skip down a little. As events in the ghetto took their course, most of my fellow dreamers fell victim to the Nazis. Of the 22 pupils in my secret school, only 4 survived. One of them was the girl who had asked me to tell her a story. Many years later, I was able to locate her, and we met in New York, where she said, "There are times when dreams sustain us more than facts. To read a book and surrender to a story is to keep our very humanity alive." Brings tears to my eyes, I'm sorry. And now I want to tell you just a brief story of my own as a librarian. Lots of funny things and unusual things have happened in almost 30 years of being a librarian. But this one, not as traumatic as the story I just read you, but I hope it made a difference in these children's lives. So I was getting ready to retire in 2004, and most of my job I had spent selecting materials. I bought all the children's books for the Ann Arbor District Library. I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm a snowbird here. Anyway, about 3 weeks before I'm due to retire, I was on the reference desk at one of the branches. I would rotate through some of the reference desks. And this man came in, and he leaned across the desk and he said to me, "Do you have any books with swear words in them?" Now, I must have had a funny look on my face. I mean, we don't react. You ask whatever you want to ask at a reference desk, we try to help you find it. But some kind of look must have passed my face. And the reason was that at that time, there was this group called Family Friendly, and they were banning books and challenging books all over the country. And I was thinking, these thoughts are going through my head a mile an hour. God, I gotta retire in 3 weeks. I don't want to be caught up in this. Please, I don't want to be caught up in this just as I'm getting ready to go out the door. But something must have crossed my face, because he leaned across the desk further and he said, no, and he says, "I have 2 boys who won't read. They don't like what they're reading in school." So I said, "Okay, so you want something more realistic?" And he said, "Yeah." So we went over to the teen section, and there on the shelf was the book America by E.R. Frank, who is a child psychologist. That's a pseudonym she uses there. And it's a very, very tough book for teens. It's about a biracial child who falls between the cracks in the foster care system in New York City. Very rough. So I pull the book off the shelf, and I open it up just randomly, and Dad's standing right behind my shoulder. I kind of take my finger down the page, and about halfway down the page is the F word. I stop at it. Dad says, "I'll take it." So I said, "Okay." So he checks the book out. It's a powerful, wonderfully written book, if you're curious. So he checks the book out. So for the next 3 weeks, next 2 weeks anyway, I was nervous as can be. I kept thinking, okay, I'm going to get a call from my director any day. There's going to be a big to-do. I've been on these committees before. It's in the newspapers. I have to go in front of the library board. It gets, I just didn't want this right before I was due to retire. So about in the last week of my retirement, I'm on the reference desk again at night. And who comes in? Dad, followed by both his sons, over to the teen section right away. So I felt that was a win, that was okay. But those books would not have been there if people had been going through trying to get rid of anything that had obscenity in it. And Penny is right. Kids read. What they read, they absorb at their level of understanding. What they don't understand is just going to go over their head. It's not to worry. And besides which, think about it. Are we really protecting our kids? I mean, kids are going to find out this stuff anyway. You listen to what's said in the hallways at the school, and it's worse than any swearing in any books. You might find, I know, because I do a lot of school visits and I hear it when I'm going up and down the hallways. Anyway. And then I wanted to tell you that a friend of mine once said, a friend who is a writer once said she hoped her book would get banned because immediately the sales go up like crazy. That's the book the kids want to read. Why can't we read that book at school? All right, so you can change the slide there. Okay. Now, what is challenging and banning. According to the American Library Association, a challenge is an attempt to remove or restrict the materials based upon objections of a person or a group, and a banning is the actual removal of those materials, just so we're clear. Now, libraries, go on to the next slide. Libraries actually adhere to a couple of documents. One is the ALA, American Library Association Freedom to Read Statement, and the other one is the Library Bill of Rights. They're long documents, but I wanted to point out a couple of special parts of it out there that's highlighted there. It is in the public interest for publishers and librarians to make available the widest diversity of views and expressions, including those which are unorthodox or unpopular with the majority. So that was our goal. And there's no place in our society for efforts to coerce the taste of others, which is fine. When I was buying books for the library, this is a big library system. Ann Arbor is where the University of Michigan is, and there's like several branches, a bookmobile, a main library, and I was buying children's books for the whole shebang. Great job. All I had to do was buy books and spend like $100,000 a year on books. You know what? How hard is that, right? Once in a while I was on the reference desk. Anyway, oh darn, now I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was gonna tell you about that. Oh well, if it comes back, I know what it was. It was that I never particularly objected to having quote unquote bad books on the shelf, because part of growing up and learning, becoming a reader is learning discernment, so that you can say, okay, well, this one, not so good. This one, okay. Like I remember I got some flack from some of the staff when I spent some money on World of Wrestling books. And like, why are you buying these wrestling books? I said, we didn't have any in the collection. We needed them just to have a balanced collection. I don't like Wide World of Wrestling, but hey, some kids do. It's okay. All right, next slide, please. All right, well, this is just a handful. I'm gonna take a drink of water. This is just a handful of some of the book. Book banning is not a new phenomenon. It's been around for many, many, many years. You heard some of that about the World War II story. Of course, the Bible, when it first came out in English, was considered terrible by some church leaders. The common folk weren't supposed to be able to read it. And some of these, you can understand why they might have been banned. Things like Of Mice and Men have derogatory racial remarks in it, that kind of thing. Captain Underpants series encourages disruptive behavior. These are books that have actually been pulled from the shelves. So these are just a few that have actually been banned. The Harry Potter series because of occultism, etc. A really sweet book that I like a lot is And Tango Makes Three, which is a nonfiction book based on fact of two male penguins raising a chick together. Encourages homosexuality. I'm like, okay, bird homosexuality, okay. But the one that might surprise you is the Bible. It was number 6 in the top 10 in 2016 of banned books. The Bible was challenged for religious viewpoints, based mainly, ALA says, on the mistaken perception that separation of church and state means publicly funded institutions are not allowed to spend funds on religious information. And that's not true, really. You can, but you want to have a balanced collection, so you need to buy the Quran as well, and other books like that. So for many schools and small libraries, it was easier just to remove the Bible and try to come up with all these other books that other people might object to. However, in 2021, it was challenged again in Texas. The Washington Post reported that a parent had challenged the inclusion of the Bible in the libraries on the grounds that it contained sexual content, violence, including rape, murder, human sacrifice, misogyny, homophobia, discrimination, and other inappropriate content. It does. Okay. All right, next slide, please. And just to give you some Some facts about what's happening today. PEN America is a nonprofit group that's been around. It's over 100 years. I think it started in 1922. It stood originally for poets, essayists, and novelists, but now it's all kind of writers group. They say they stand at the intersection of literature and human rights to protect free expression in the United States and worldwide. And it's their mission to unite writers and their allies and to celebrate creative expression and defend the liberties that make it possible. But they did a study and they found from July 2021 to June 2022, 2,532 books were banned from schools. That means actually removed from the shelves, not just challenged. 1,648 were unique titles. 41% had LGBTQ characters. 40% had primary or secondary characters of color. 21% directly addressed race and racism. Next slide. And here you can see a little further the breakdown. There was also 22% for sexual content, 10% with themes of rights and activism, 9% certain biographies people objected to, and 4% stories about religious minorities. So that was 21 to 22. And next slide. Here you can kind of see a map of where Florida falls in the top, along with Texas and Pennsylvania and Tennessee, and then top number of books banned. My other home state, Michigan, and well, Kentucky isn't too bad. Kentucky's my native state, but Michigan, where I live the rest of the year, is up there as well. And as I said, it's, these are the very books kids go out and get immediately if they can. So next slide. All right. But what worries me, what I found out from the reading about the study is that at least 40% of the bans are linked to political pressure exerted by state officials or elected lawmakers. So not necessarily the parents, you would think, or maybe one parent has alerted their local lawmaker, their local school board person. And all it takes is one. I've been on a couple of committees. I was on a committee once for, somebody wanted the library to remove that movie with Marlon Brando, Last Tango in Paris. Has anybody seen that? No, okay, well. She complained she thought it was about learning how to dance the tango. Well, it isn't. You get about halfway through and you go, whoa. Anyway, somebody brings it to some politician's notice, is what's happening. And we know with the elections coming up in 2024, this is a big deal. So you can make a name for yourself by pushing this. And so 40% of those bans are linked to political push, which to me is the scariest thing. Next slide, please. Okay, well, in March of 2022, the governor signed Florida's House Bill 1467, which will force all elementary schools to provide a searchable list of every book available in their libraries or used in instruction. School boards must let the public know when they plan to consider approving new instructional books and allow anyone to comment. Any objections to the material from a parent or not must be reported to the state. Okay, so this is in effect right now for Florida's K through 3 schools only at this point. I have a girlfriend who teaches, she's a teacher in West Palm Beach County, and she teaches first grade. So I called her the other night just to talk to her about this. And she said, well, at first, of course, everybody's up in arms. For one thing, teachers buy books themselves. They're not owned by the school. There's the teachers' private collections in their classrooms, hundreds of books, hundreds of books. And I actually saw a picture online where one school, the teachers just took all the books off their shelves. Shelves were empty. Well, my friend in West Palm Beach said, no, they decided, teachers love kids and kids need books. So they weren't going to remove all the books. What they were going to do is flood that list because they have thousands, She said they do get paid for working overtime and putting barcoding and trying to get these things on some kind of comprehensive state list. But the thing is, who's going to check that list? Some parents not going to sit there and go through 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 books. You know, who's going to check the list is somebody who has an agenda and already has a list of certain titles and wants to see if it's in your school district, or a politician. So it's kind of just, she sees it as just kind of make work, just an extra political thing that could be said. Okay. So all that undermines our freedom to read. And then, of course, next slide, please. Okay. Is that the right one? Yeah. Okay, well, according to the Bradenton Herald, you know, there's been this controversy about the AP Black Studies class in the news lately. And according to the Bradenton Herald, this new proposal from the governor's office requires university-level general education courses to not promote ideological indoctrination, gives university leaders the ability to call a post-tenure review at any time, and prohibits the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion in hiring decisions. And since this came out, you know, the AP Black Studies curriculum college board that designs these have said that it was a draft that got leaked. And of course, there were things that were going to change anyway, that they did not cow down to the governor's wishes to change some things, like not studying critical race theory and stuff like that. They were going to put some of that online. So it's still in the works of what's going on. But you know what scares me a lot about this statement is that line, prohibits the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion in hiring decisions. Are we going to go back to the 1950s before affirmative action, when you didn't see a countenance of color in any higher institution? So, you know, they've just set affirmative action way off the side, and I really wonder what that's going to do to the way our teachers, our professors, what their faces are going to look like, and who our students are going to get to hear from. So for me, that's a really scary part, that little bit there. Okay, next slide. So where does it end? I want to mention also, this may be, think about this in the future, this may be a little futuristic, but you know that there are artificial intelligence software nowadays that can write books. Yeah, there's one real popular one called Jasper AI, and it touts that it can write a blog post in minutes and it can write a book in a few hours. You put in an outline, you put in your title, your chapter titles, your characters' names and stuff like that, and it writes the book for you. So what are we going to get down the road? Pablum, you know, these books written by AI, because they can be, you know, programmed not to have anything offensive in it. Anyway, so this reminds me of a quote from Umberto Eco, that wonderful Italian writer. I don't remember what year exactly, but in the 1990s, he wrote an essay for the New York Review of Books on fascism. And he says, all the Nazis or fascist school books made use of an impoverished vocabulary and an elementary syntax in order to limit the instruments, the books, for complex and critical reasoning. To dumb down the masses. I think it's a very fascist tactic. And I don't know why more people aren't talking about that. But if you can dumb down the masses, you can lead them easier. Okay, next slide. So what can you do? You can wear your beliefs on your body, and you can get lots of books, lots of clothes that say I read banned books, or I'm with the band, and that kind of thing. So that's the one I want to get. I don't have that yet. You can write your representative or your senators, please, in Florida. I'm not a Florida taxpayer. I'm just a snowbird, so I can't do that here, but I can do it in Michigan. And of course, you can support PEN America and the Freedom to Read Foundation, which is a foundation that fights these battles that are in the courts when a book is banned. And I'm getting an honorarium for today's speaking. My husband and I have already decided we'll donate that to the Freedom to Read Foundation. Next slide. I want to end up, we're almost at the end here, but I just want to end up with a story that's not about banned books, but is about how you never know what a person needs at a certain time in their life when they, walk into your library. It's hard to know. And this is one of my all-time favorite reference questions. So I was on the desk one afternoon, late afternoon, with another colleague, another librarian. And this father and son come in, and the little boy's very vocal. Dad's standing behind him. The little boy comes up to the desk and he says to me, or he says to us, "I want to know what God does all day long, just all day long." My colleague turned to me and says, "You can take this." I'm thinking, great. Well, I get up, library's got to provide. I did not want to let him down. I get up and I'm kind of shuffling my way toward the Dewey Decimal 200s, which is the religion section. And I'm thinking, okay, I've seen lots of pictures of Jesus. He wants to know God. The burning bush, I'm trying to think. I'm thinking, well, he doesn't want household gods and pagan gods, Well, at that time, we were in the middle of a construction. We were adding an addition onto our library. So they'd squeezed the children's department up into the fine arts department. So as I'm going down oh, by the way, Dad is standing behind going like this, which I thought was hilarious. But the kid put the knife in and twisted it. I'm walking down the hall and he's going, "Just any old book in this whole library, just any one in this whole library can tell me what God does all day. You got a lot of books here, lady." He's going on and on. Just any old book. I'm like, oh gosh. So I remember the Sistine Chapel. I go over to the fine arts section. I get out a book of Michelangelo's The Sistine Chapel and the Passion of Adam. The kid takes a look at it for a few minutes. Okay, closes it up and goes over to the kids' area. So I go back to my colleague and I says, well, he now thinks God is Caucasian and an old guy, and he lays around on a cloud all day touching fingers with people. That's okay. His library served him, and that was the important thing. And the other thing that was important that I saw in both those stories, I often blog this around Father's Day time, is both those fathers knew what their kids needed and took them to the library to find it. I love that. Okay, next slide, and then that's it. This is just some of my books. My website is just Shutta.com. I've got some glitches going on right now, but that's it. Thank you so much.